A spring evening in Zurich, the city lights shimmer like fallen stars on the surface of the lake. Inside a high-end restaurant, Victoria Stein, 34 and a billionaire CEO, sits across from a man who owns almost nothing compared to her. This isn't a date, it is an unexpected conversation after a gala, a moment of raw truth between two strangers. Victoria is a legend in the boardroom, but her penthouse is a graveyard of silence. She watches Daniel Brooks, a single dad, as he speaks about his daughter. Suddenly, Victoria whispers, "I want a family." Daniel's reply stops her heart. Victoria Stein was the ice queen of Zurich's tech sector. At 34, she commanded a global conglomerate from a glass-walled office that overlooked the Swiss Alps. She was brilliant, decisive, and worth more than most small nations. In her boardroom, men twice her age trembled when she adjusted her glasses. To her, people were data points, assets to be optimized or liabilities to be liquidated. Her name was a synonym for success, and her time was measured in million-dollar minutes. But behind the sharp suits and the predatory business instincts, Victoria was a woman living in a museum of her own making. She had every luxury, but no life. Her penthouse was a masterpiece of minimalist design, all white marble and cold steel. There were no crooked picture frames, no stray shoes, and certainly no laughter echoing through the hallways. Victoria had grown up in a world of gold-plated cages. Her parents were titans of industry who viewed affection as a distraction and child-rearing as a department to be outsourced. She remembered her 5th birthday not by the cake, but by the polite typed note left by her mother's assistant. To them, family was a brand to be managed, not a group of people to be loved. Victoria had learned early on that feelings were liabilities. She spent her 20s building empires, convinced that if the numbers on her screen grew large enough, the hollowness in her chest would eventually disappear. Every night she returned to her quiet home, ate a pre-prepared meal from a silver tray, and stared at the dark lake until sleep claimed her. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. Everything changed at a high-profile charity gala for children's education. Victoria was the guest of honor, the woman whose donation would build 5 schools. But amidst the sea of tuxedos and forced smiles, she noticed a man standing near the buffet table. He wasn't a donor, he was a volunteer engineer named Daniel Brooks, and he wasn't alone. Clinging to his hand was an 8-year-old girl named Lily, who was currently wearing a mismatched tutu over her jeans and trying to explain why her drawing of a robot was superior to a Picasso. Victoria watched them from across the room, hidden behind her champagne glass. She was mesmerized by the way Daniel looked at his daughter. He didn't look at his phone once. He didn't look at the celebrities or the cameras. He looked at Lily as if she were the only heat source in a frozen world. When Lily accidentally spilled her red juice on Daniel's only worn suit jacket, Victoria braced for the explosion. She expected a flash of anger, the kind of cold disappointment she had seen from her own father 100 times when she wasn't perfect. Instead, Daniel just laughed. He knelt down in the middle of the crowded ballroom, wiped her chin with a cocktail napkin, and kissed her forehead. "It's okay, baby," Daniel whispered, loud enough for Victoria to catch in the lull of the music. "It's just a suit. It doesn't have a heartbeat. You do. Now tell me more about this robot's laser eyes." That simple sentence hit Victoria like a physical blow to the chest. She realized in that heartbeat that Daniel Brooks, a man in a stained suit with a humble bank account, possessed the one thing her billions could never buy. He had a connection. He had a home. He had a reason to wake up that had nothing to do with a stock price or a quarterly projection. For the first time in 34 years, Victoria felt the crushing weight of her own success. She realized she had been winning a race that led to a dessert. As the gala ended, a sudden spring rain began to fall over the cobblestone streets of Zurich. Victoria, standing under the massive portico, saw Daniel struggling with a broken umbrella, while Lily giggled, trying to catch raindrops on her tongue. Impulsively, driven by a hunger she couldn't name, Victoria offered them a ride in her chauffeured limousine. Daniel was hesitant, his eyes scanning her expensive dress. But Lily was enchanted by the big, shiny spaceship car. as they sat in the plush, silent leather interior. The contrast was devastating. Victoria was a queen in a silk cage, and Daniel was a king in a damp backpack, surrounded by the electric, messy energy of a happy child. The ride to Daniel's modest apartment took 20 minutes, but for Victoria, it felt like traveling to a distant planet. The limousine, usually a mobile office for hostile takeovers, was suddenly transformed by Lily's laughter. She chattered non-stop about her school projects, her favorite dinosaur pasta, and why swans were actually very grumpy. Daniel listened to every word with a patient, quiet strength that fascinated Victoria. He was a construction engineer who worked long hours on site, but he told Victoria that his real work began the moment he saw Lily's face at the school gates. "I lost my wife 4 years ago," Daniel said softly, catching Victoria's gaze in the rearview mirror. "Since then, it's just been us. I work to keep the lights on, but I live to see her smile. It's a simple life. Sometimes it's loud, and sometimes the laundry never ends, but it's full. I wouldn't trade one sticky hug for all the silence in the world." Victoria looked out the window at the expensive boutiques of the Bahnhofstrasse, their windows glowing with diamonds. "I used to think full meant a calendar with no empty slots," she admitted, her voice lower than usual. "But looking at you two, I realize my calendar is full, but my life is empty. I have pictures of buildings in my house. You have pictures of memories." Daniel didn't offer a polite cliché. He didn't try to make her feel better. He just nodded, his eyes reflecting an understanding that made Victoria feel stripped bare. When they reached his cramped apartment building, Lily insisted that the nice shiny lady come in for a cup of real tea. Victoria, much to the shock of her driver, stepped out of the limo and agreed. The apartment was small, cluttered with half-finished Lego sets, and smelled of cinnamon and laundry detergent. It was the complete opposite of Victoria's sterile, scentless penthouse. Victoria felt the grain of the worn floorboards beneath her heels and realized she had forgotten what a real home felt like. There were photos of a smiling woman on the walls, and Lily's art was taped to every available surface of the fridge. It wasn't perfect, but it felt vibrantly alive. While Lily went to change into her pajamas, Daniel made 2 cups of simple tea in mismatched mugs. They sat at a small, scarred wooden table in the kitchen. Victoria felt out of place, her silk dress catching on the rough wood. Yet she felt strangely safe. She asked Daniel about the challenges of being a single father. He spoke of the sleepless nights when Lily had a fever, the frantic mornings when they couldn't find her left shoe, and the quiet, sacred moments when they read together before the lights went out. "Money can buy you a house anywhere in Zurich, Victoria," Daniel said, stirring his tea with a plastic spoon. "But it can't buy you a home. A home is built out of the things you can't quantify on a spreadsheet. It's built out of patience and the willingness to be there when things are falling apart. It's the shared exhaustion that binds you." Victoria looked at her hands, her perfectly manicured nails a symbol of her tightly controlled life. "I spent my whole life avoiding falling apart," she whispered. "I thought control was the shield. I thought if I reached the top, I wouldn't be lonely anymore. I thought power was the cure for the silence my parents left me." She looked at Daniel, the vulnerability finally shattering her CEO mask. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, punctuated only by the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of Lily singing to her teddy bear. Victoria took a deep breath, her voice trembling with a confession she hadn't even told her therapist. "I want a family," she said. She said it like a prayer. She said it like a surrender. She expected Daniel to say that with her beauty, her status, and her wealth, it would be easy. She expected him to tell her that any man in the city would jump at the chance to be with her. She expected a superficial answer to a deep, aching wound. Daniel didn't move. He didn't smile. He looked at Victoria for a long, piercing minute. He saw the billionaire, but he also saw the little girl who had never been truly hugged. He saw the power, but he also saw the paralyzing fear behind it. "Why?" he asked. The question stunned her. No one had ever asked Victoria why she wanted something. Usually, people just scrambled to give it to her. Because I'm tired of coming home to a tomb, Victoria said, a single tear finally escaping and tracking through her expensive foundation. I'm tired of having no one to share the sunset with. I want, I want what you have. I want a reason to laugh when the juice spills on my life. I want to belong to someone, not just own something. Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious. Victoria braced herself for a business-like suggestion, perhaps a recommendation for a high-end matchmaking service. She was a CEO. She was used to strategic plans. But Daniel Brooks was about to give her an answer that would dismantle her entire worldview. Daniel set his teacup down with a soft clink on the wooden table. The first twist came in his tone. It wasn't pity. It was a cold, hard truth that a billionaire wasn't used to hearing. Victoria, he said, his voice steady as iron, a family isn't something you buy, and it's not something you plan like a company merger. You're looking for a family as if it's the next acquisition on your portfolio. You think you can find a man with the right credentials, buy a house in the right district, and check a box. But that's not a family. That's just a social contract. That's just more marble to dust. Victoria flinched. The bluntness of his words felt like a physical slap. I'm not trying to buy anyone, Daniel. I'm being as sincere as I know how to be. I know you are, Daniel countered, but you're a CEO. You're used to delegating the struggle. You're used to paying for convenience so you don't have to deal with the grit of human friction. But a family is built entirely out of the things that are inconvenient. It's built in the 2 a.m. fever that won't break when you have a board meeting at 8. It's built in the ugly arguments over who forgot to buy the milk. It's built in the years of showing up when you're tired, when you're angry, and when you have absolutely nothing left to give but your presence. He looked toward the hallway where Lily was now asleep. You want the result, but I don't think you're ready for the process. You want the Ice Queen to have a castle with people in it, but a family needs warmth, and warmth requires you to melt. It requires you to be messy. You have to be willing to be seen when you're not a billionaire. You have to be willing to be just. Victoria, and frankly, Victoria is currently terrified of being human. The second twist came when Daniel's eyes softened, revealing his own shadow. I'll tell you something I've never told anyone, Daniel whispered. When my wife, Sarah, passed away, I thought I was done. I thought I couldn't be a father because I was too broken. I tried to manage Lily's grief like a project. I was efficient. I was organized. I was exactly like a CEO. I had a schedule for her crying and a KPI for her recovery, and Lily was miserable. She was drifting away from me because she didn't want a manager. She wanted a dad who would sit on the floor and cry with her until her legs fell asleep. Victoria listened. Her breath caught in her throat. She had spent her life being managed by her own parents. One night, Lily looked at me and said, Daddy, you're trying to be perfect, but I just want you to be here. That was the moment I realized that family isn't about being good at it. It's about being present in the imperfection. It's about being the person who stays when things get ugly. Victoria, you've spent 34 years being perfect. If you want a family, you have to learn how to be a mess. You have to learn how to fail and still be loved. Victoria looked around the small kitchen. She saw a chipped plate in the sink, a stray crayon on the floor, and a stack of unpaid bills on the counter. For the first time in her life, she didn't see clutter. She saw the beautiful evidence of a life that was shared. She realized that she had been looking for a family as if she were hiring a staff, looking for qualified candidates who could meet her high-performance standards. She had been looking for a family as an accessory to her success, not as a foundation for her soul. I don't know how to be a mess, Victoria admitted, more tears falling now. I don't know how to not be in charge. The silence is all I know how to control. If I let go, what's left? Then you don't want a family yet, Daniel said. But he didn't say it unkindly. He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. His palm was rough, calloused from work, and incredibly warm. You just want the idea of one. If you want the reality, You have to start by learning how to belong to yourself before you can belong to anyone else. You have to stop building towers and start feeling the ground. You have to realize that you are not your net worth. Victoria looked at his hand on hers. In that moment, the power dynamic shifted entirely. The woman who could move markets felt powerless in the face of a simple construction engineer's wisdom. She realized that her millions were a shield, and if she wanted to be loved, she had to drop the shield. She had to be brave enough to be vulnerable. She had to be brave enough to be unbillionaire-like. She looked at Daniel, really looked at him. She saw a man who had been through the fire and came out softer, not harder. She realized that the answer to her longing wasn't in a new relationship or a new 5-year plan. It was in a new way of existing. "Teach me," she whispered. Daniel smiled, a real, deep smile that reached his tired eyes. "I can't teach you, Victoria, but Lily and I are going for a walk by the lake tomorrow afternoon. No cars, no assistants, no phones, just a walk. If you want to see what messy looks like in the sunlight, you're welcome to join us. But you have to bring your own ice cream money." Victoria felt a flicker of hope that was more exhilarating than any business deal she had ever closed. She realized that Daniel hadn't just stunned her with his reply. He had invited her into a world where she didn't have to be the CEO. He had invited her to be human. The next afternoon, the sun was bright over Lake Zurich. Victoria arrived at the meeting point wearing jeans and a simple sweater she had bought at a normal department store. No designer labels, no jewelry, no armor. She looked ordinary, and for the first time in her life, she felt extraordinary. She felt the cool breeze on her skin instead of the filtered air of her office. Lily was already there, chasing pigeons and yelling about a giant swan that looked like a cloud. Daniel looked at Victoria and gave her a sharp, appreciative nod. He didn't comment on her clothes. He just handed her a cheap bottle of water. They walked for hours. They didn't talk about the technology sector, the global economy, or her board of directors. They talked about the architecture of the old town, the way the light hit the water, and the stories they had loved as children. Daniel told her about his dreams of building bridges that lasted centuries, not companies that lasted a decade. Victoria found herself playing tag with Lily, her laughter echoing across the promenade. She tripped on a loose stone, scuffed her knee, and for the first time in her life, she didn't care about the optics. She bought ice cream for Lily and ended up with a chocolate stain on her sleeve. She felt light. She felt the mess Daniel had talked about, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever experienced. The Ice Queen was beginning to melt under the Zurich sun. She realized that Lily didn't care about her portfolio. She only cared that Victoria was good at finding hiding spots. Over the next few months, Victoria became a frequent presence in their lives. She didn't come as a CEO. She didn't offer them money or try to fix their apartment with a renovation team. She came as a friend. She came as Victoria. She learned how to cook a simple pasta dish and actually laughed when she burned the first 3 attempts. She learned how to braid Lily's hair, even if the braids were always a little crooked. She learned that the most important part of her day wasn't the morning briefing, but the 10-minute video call with Lily to talk about school and grumpy swans. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, Victoria and Daniel were sitting on the tiny balcony of his apartment, watching the stars. The scent of jasmine from a neighbor's pot filled the air. "I used to think success meant having everything," Victoria said, her voice a soft whisper in the night air. "I thought if I had the most, I was the best. I thought my name on a building was immortality. I thought I was winning, Daniel." Daniel looked at her, his face illuminated by the moonlight. "And what do you think now?" "I think success is having someone who waits for you at home," she replied. "I think it's knowing that if you fall, you won't hit the ground alone. I think success is the ability to be quiet with someone and not feel the need to fill the space with a business plan. I think success is being a person, Daniel, just a person who belongs." She turned to him, her eyes filled with a new kind of clarity. "You were right, Daniel. I wasn't looking for a family. I was looking for an acquisition. But you and Lily, You showed me that a family is a living, breathing, inconvenient thing. You showed me that I don't have to build it. I just have to be part of it. I have to let it build me." Daniel smiled, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "You're doing pretty well at the messy part, Victoria. Your pasta still needs work, but your heart is doing just fine. You're finally learning how to melt into the life you actually have. If you believe love is built in small moments, type, 'I will live kindly.'" The act ends with Victoria Stein, the billionaire, sitting in a small plastic chair on a cramped balcony, eating lukewarm, slightly overcooked pasta, and feeling like the richest woman in the world. She had finally stopped trying to own the world and started learning how to belong to it. A year has passed since that spring evening in Zurich. The global markets still tremble when Victoria Stein speaks, but her voice has changed. It is no longer the voice of a cold, ice queen. It is the voice of a leader who understands the human cost of every decision. She has implemented a family-first policy at her corporation, offering unprecedented support for parents and mental health. For the first time, her company has the highest employee retention rate in the industry. Her stockholders were worried at first, but they soon realized that a company with a soul was more profitable than a machine. The real change is in the penthouse. It is no longer a graveyard of silence. There are crayons on the mahogany dining table. There is a small, messy garden of mismatched flowers on the terrace that Lily planted. And there is laughter. Victoria still works hard, but she leaves the office at 5 p.m. every day, no exceptions. Because at 5:30 p.m., there is a little girl waiting for her with a drawing of a new robot and a story about a grumpy swan. Victoria didn't try to buy Daniel a new life. Instead, she moved into his world as much as he moved into hers. They built a bridge between their two realities. They are a family now, not a perfect one, but a real one. They have arguments about the laundry, they have messy mornings when the coffee runs out, and they have a love that is built on the foundation of being present. Victoria realized that the most valuable thing she ever invested in was the time she spent sitting on the floor playing Legos. Daniel still works as an engineer, and he still reminds Victoria to be a mess whenever she gets too focused on control. He taught her that her value wasn't in her bank balance, but in the way she listened to Lily's dreams. And Victoria? She has learned that her billions are only valuable when they are used to protect the things that money can't buy. The moments of quiet, the sounds of laughter, and the peace of a shared home. The final scene shows the three of them walking along Lake Zurich as the sun sets, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. It is the same path they walked on that first afternoon. Lily is in the middle, holding Victoria's hand on one side and Daniel's on the other. They stop to watch the swans. Victoria looks at Daniel, then at Lily, and then at the shimmering water. She is no longer looking for the next thing to conquer. She has already arrived. The voiceover concludes with a gentle, resonant tone. She had the money, she had the power, she had the fame, but what she wanted most was something she couldn't buy, trade, or own. She wanted to belong. Victoria learned that family isn't a project you complete or a goal you achieve with a team of experts. It's a rhythm you join. It's the courage to be imperfect, to be vulnerable, and to realize that you are enough, just as you are. Sometimes the answer isn't building a family from scratch. It's finally learning how to let your walls down and belong to one. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Chip Healing Stories. We tell the ones that shouldn't be forgotten.